Today I got a 2 out of 5 cigars for you. And that's me being generous because I've smoked better advice out of a gas station humidor. The book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was written by Robert Kiyosaki, a guy who thinks borrowing money to buy stuff you can't spell is how you get rich. Here's what I think. It's flashy. It's quotable. It's full of big ideas about building wealth, thinking different, and buying assets instead of liabilities. You'll hear words like passive income, real estate, cash flow, and mindset about 30 times per chapter. And yeah, if you're already out of debt, have savings, and are ready to take risks, this book might help you think bigger. But if you're broke, in debt, juggling credit cards, and struggling to keep your lights on, then this one's going to screw you up faster than payday loans and crypto tips combined. Kiyosaki basically tells you that poor people stay poor because of their mindset, and rich people get rich because they take risks. That's nice in theory. But in real life, risk without discipline is just expensive stupidity. I'm not saying he's all wrong. The idea that school doesn't teach you about money? True. The lesson that assets should make you money, not cost you. Solid. But this ain't a how-to manual. It's a philosophy book dressed up like a shortcut to millionaire status. He tells you what to think about. He doesn't show you how to actually do any of it. And don't even get me started on the advice to borrow money to invest. Ramsey would faint, and I'd be right there fanning him with a collection notice. So here's the verdict. If you're already stable and you're looking to build long-term wealth, maybe read this one with a filter. But if you're still in survival mode, trying to fix broke, skip this book or shelf it for later. Because without a foundation, this book becomes one big financial fantasy. If you're ready to stop pretending and start fixing broke, here's a deeper dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If the total money makeover was a slap in the face, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is more like a smirk from across the room, smug, confident, and saying, "You've been lied to." The wake-up call in this book doesn't come from numbers. It comes from watching two dads, one rich, one poor, teach completely different philosophies about money. And here's the kicker. You've probably been raised by the poor one, even if he had a job and wore a tie. Robert Kiyosaki lays it out early. Poor Dad says, get good grades, go to school, get a job, and climb the ladder. Rich Dad says, own the damn ladder. Right away, you see the trap. Most of us were told to trade time for money, play it safe, and let someone else worry about the big stuff. Meanwhile, the people getting rich weren't smarter. They were just playing a different game. This book doesn't whisper. It tells you flat out, your financial beliefs might be the very thing keeping you broke. Think about that. The way you see work, money, education, it might all be rigged to keep you earning just enough to survive, but never enough to break free. Now here's where it hits you. Rich Dad, Poor Dad doesn't open with charts or budget plans. It opens with a story. And in that story, the poor dad is the educated one. He's got the degrees, the job security, the pension, and he still struggles financially. The rich dad? No college, no credentials, but he understands assets, cash flow, and leverage. The message? School teaches you to be a good employee, not a financially free human being. That's the punch in the gut. You start questioning everything you were taught. Why didn't they teach this in school? Why do we learn algebra but not how to handle a mortgage? Why is it normal to owe your soul to a student loan and still not know how to file taxes? Kiyosaki's answer is blunt. because the system isn't built to make you rich. It's not subtle, and it's not exactly gentle. Kiyosaki straight up says that following the traditional path, job, house, retirement, will keep you poor, or at best, stuck. And if you're still paycheck to paycheck with nothing saved and no clue how to invest, it's hard to argue with him. He's not saying your parents were dumb. He's saying they were trained by the same system that trained you. And that system is built to create obedient earners, not free thinkers. Now, does this hit harder than Ramsey's version of the truth? Maybe not. But it stirs something deeper. It challenges your entire worldview. And that's a powerful start, if you're ready for it. The wake-up call in Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't about how much debt you've got. It's about how little you actually understand about money, even if you got a job and a diploma. And once that switch flips, you start to wonder, what else have I accepted that's keeping me broke? That's what makes this book dangerous, in a good way or a bad one, depending on how grounded you are. Because when you start questioning the old way, you better have a new way ready to replace it. Otherwise, you're just broke and lost. Here's the part where I put down the cigar for a second and give Kiyosaki his due. For all the fluff, ego, and vague storytelling in this book, there are some real ideas in here, ones that stick with you long after you've closed the cover. Ideas that, if you've got your financial house in order, can absolutely change how you build wealth. Let's start with the biggest one, assets versus liabilities. Kiyosaki hammers this so often you'd think it's the only concept in the book. And maybe it is, but he's right. Most people think they own assets when they're really swimming in liabilities. That fancy car you're paying off, liability. That house you mortgage to the hilt and call an investment, still a liability until it puts money in your pocket. That's the first idea that punches through the noise. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. It's not about how things look. It's about what they do. Most broke folks are busy trying to look successful while quietly bleeding cash every month. Rich folks, they buy things that pay them back. Then there's the idea that you should make money work for you, not just earn it, spend it, and repeat, but put it to work in investments, in businesses, in assets that generate income whether you show up or not. And while Kiyosaki doesn't always explain the how clearly, the why is solid. Working a job forever keeps you capped. Owning income-producing assets creates freedom. Another big one, financial literacy matters more than income. This hits hard if you've ever thought, if I just made more money, I'd be okay. Truth is, a lot of people earn six figures and still live paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because they don't understand money. They don't understand taxes, interest, leverage, or cash flow. They know how to earn, but not how to keep. That's what Kiyosaki gets right. He shifts the conversation from how much do you make to how much do you know. He challenges the idea that high income equals success. In his world, high financial intelligence is what builds wealth. You can be a broke teacher who learns to invest smart and come out ahead of a doctor who spends like an idiot. He also talks a lot about entrepreneurship, owning businesses, taking risks, and building systems. That message isn't for everyone, and it's definitely not the place to start if you're eyeball deep in debt. But once you've got savings, margin, and a foundation, that shift from employee to owner can be a game changer, not because it's easy, but because it finally puts you in control. Now, here's what I like most about this section. It makes you think differently. It challenges the default settings. And even if you're not ready to buy rental properties or launch a company, you start asking better questions. Is this thing I'm buying going to pay me back? What am I learning that actually helps my future? Am I building income or just digging deeper? Kiyosaki doesn't give you the perfect map, but he gives you a different compass, one that doesn't point to a paycheck as the finish line. And that alone makes this section worth your time, if you got your foundation straight first. All right, now we get to the part where Grumpy lights another cigar and starts grumbling. Because while Rich Dad, Poor Dad has some gems, it also has enough hot air to float a parade balloon. Let's be honest. This book is half advice, half storytelling, and the storytelling don't always land. Sometimes it inspires, sometimes it just makes you squint and wonder if the guy's ever paid a late fee in his life. First off, the vagueness. Kiyosaki talks about buying assets, creating passive income, escaping the rat race, but he never quite tells you how. What kind of assets? Where do you find them? How do you evaluate risk? What's the first step if you've got $38 in your checking account and a car with 2 bald tires? He'll hype the dream, but don't expect a checklist. You'll get mindset, not mechanics. Then there's the constant glorification of risk. Now look, I'm not against risk. I started a business from scratch and bet on myself more times than I can count. But Kiyosaki acts like if you're not using debt to leverage real estate, you're a coward. That's dangerous advice if you're still swimming in credit card debt and haven't saved your first emergency fund. Risk without a safety net isn't bold. It's reckless. It's how people go from inspired to bankrupt real quick. Another one that earns the eyebrow raise? The attitude. There's a little too much, if you're not rich, it's your fault, swagger in this book. Now, sure, personal responsibility is key. I've built Fixing Broke on that very idea. But Kiyosaki sometimes comes off like he thinks being broke is a moral failure and wealth is just about having guts. That ain't the full picture. Sometimes broke folks aren't lazy. They're just buried, undertaught, or barely surviving. On the flip side, let's talk about the cheer moments, because there are a few, and they're worth pointing out. One of the biggest is how Kiyosaki gives people permission to think bigger. He tells people stuck in survival mode that there's a bigger game being played, and you're allowed to learn the rules. That message alone lights a fire under a lot of folks. Another cheer-worthy thing, he challenges the status quo. The go to school, get a job, buy a house blueprint doesn't work for everyone, and he's not afraid to say so. That's refreshing, especially for people who followed the rules and still ended up broke and disillusioned. Sometimes you need someone to grab the chalk and redraw the board. But here's the bottom line. If you read this book while you're still broke, still in debt, still chasing stability, there's a good chance you'll get hyped up and make dumb moves. You'll want to invest before you're ready. You'll want to start a business before you've learned to manage money. That's where this book can do harm. It'll inflate your confidence before you've built your competence. So yeah, there's stuff to cheer in here. But don't forget to keep your boots on the ground. Inspiration is great, but it's not a replacement for a plan. And this book? It's 80% inspiration. Don't confuse that for a GPS. All right, so you read the book. You're fired up. You're pacing around your living room thinking, I need to buy a duplex and start an LLC by Tuesday. Slow down, hotshot. Rich Dad, Poor Dad might light a fire in your belly, but unless your wallet's ready and your brain's trained, all you're going to do is burn through savings and make dumb decisions in a smarter tone of voice. So, what should you actually do with this book? First, don't treat it like a manual. This is not the total money makeover. This is not a step-by-step roadmap. It's more like a motivational speech in book form, full of energy, big ideas, and not a whole lot of guardrails. You read this book when you've handled the basics. When the bills are paid, the debt is gone, and your emergency fund is sitting pretty. Then you can start dreaming bigger. But if you're still overdrafting your account, put this book down and go fix that first. Next, take the asset liability lesson seriously. If there's one thing you actually use from this book, it's this. Before you buy something, ask yourself if it's going to pay you back, or just drain your cash. That simple filter can change how you see everything: your house, your car, your hobbies, even your career. Kiyosaki's not wrong here. Real wealth builds when your money starts working harder than you do. Then, get financially literate. Don't just think rich, learn rich. Read more books. Watch people who actually teach the how, not just the why. Learn how to budget, how to invest, how to evaluate risk. Kiyosaki will wake you up, but you still need to go to school somewhere else. Use this book as a primer, not a playbook. Now, if you're thinking, well, I want to build wealth sooner than later, good. But remember what I keep saying. You can't build wealth while fixing broke at the same time. You can't build on sand. You need a foundation. And that foundation is budgeting, saving, and staying out of stupid debt. Read Rich Dad, Poor Dad too early, and you'll get ideas bigger than your reality. And that's how folks crash. But if you're ready, if your financial house is stable and you've got margin to think bigger, then this book becomes a solid mental reset. It breaks you out of paycheck thinking. It makes you question the 40-year career plan. And it dares you to step into ownership instead of wage dependency. That's powerful. For the right person at the right time. Here's the grumpy truth. I wouldn't hand this book to someone who just got their power turned back on. I'd hand them Dave Ramsey and a shovel. But for someone who's already climbed out of the ditch, yeah, this might just be the book that helps them build the house on higher ground. So don't toss it. Don't blindly follow it either. Just know where you are in the journey. Then read accordingly. Because Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't about money. It's about mindset. And that's only useful once your money's finally under control.